Okay, let's talk about one of the biggest challenges of our time. How do we feed everyone on the planet without, destroying it in the process? For so long, we've been told it's a simple, stark choice. You can have productive farms, or you can have healthy forests, but you can't have both.
But what if that's just the wrong way to look at it? What if we've been asking the wrong question this whole time? What if a farm could also be a forest? I know it sounds a little out there, like a riddle, but stick with me, because exploring this idea might just change how you think about food forever.
And this really lays out that classic conflict perfectly, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the conventional farm. It's a super simplified system, usually just one crop, all designed for one thing: getting the biggest yield possible. That means it needs tons of inputs: water, fertilizer, you name it. And then over here, you have the natural forest. It's complex, it's buzzing with biodiversity, and it takes care of itself. They really couldn't seem more different.
But what if you could actually merge the best parts of both? Well, that's where this really powerful concept called agroforestry comes into play. It's all about bridging that gap. Now, the key thing to get here is that this isn't just about, planting a few random trees in a field and calling it a day. No. It's an intentional, carefully managed system. It's about looking at how a forest works, its different layers, its diversity, all its connections, and using that as a blueprint for a farm. You're working with nature's genius, not against it.
And even though the word agroforestry sounds pretty modern, the idea has been around for a long, long time. Get this. Way back in 1929, a geographer named J. Russell Smith was already writing about a permanent agriculture, one built around tree crops that could be productive without destroying the land. He was basically solving a problem decades before most of the world even knew it existed. Pretty incredible.
But the story goes back even further than that, way, way further. So let's take a look at how these really ancient ideas are showing up all over the world today.
The truth is, for literally thousands of years, indigenous communities have been masters of this. They had this incredibly deep, close relationship with the forest. They didn't need a fancy word like agroforestry, of course. It was just life. It was a deep understanding of how to grow food as part of a thriving ecosystem, not by replacing it. So let's dive into a really cool example from the tropics. It's a system often called a home garden, but honestly, that name totally undersells it. It is so much more than that.
In parts of Mexico, for instance, there's a system called the Cuchtacoloyan, which literally means useful forest, and that name is just perfect. It's basically a managed jungle. Imagine this. You've got a tall canopy of fruit and nut trees. Then below that, a mid-story of shrubs like coffee bushes or spices. And all the way down at ground level, you have vegetables and herbs. Everything is stacked, growing together. It's this complex, living skyscraper that provides everything from food and medicine to fuel.
Okay, so that's a tropical example. But don't think for a second this only works in the jungle. Agroforestry is super flexible. Let's head to a totally different climate and look at something called silvopasture.
Silvopasture is pretty much what it sounds like. It's where you combine trees and pasture for animals. So instead of chopping down all the trees to make a field, you actually bring them together. The trees provide shade and shelter for the livestock, which is great for their health. The animals in turn graze the grass, and their manure fertilizes the soil. It's this beautiful, self-supporting cycle. And for the farmer, it's a win-win, creating multiple streams of income from animal products, timber, maybe even nuts or fruit.
Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, with all those plants packed together, aren't they just fighting each other for sunlight and water? And yeah, that's a great question. They are competing. But here's the brilliant part. The genius of agroforestry isn't about getting rid of competition. It's about cleverly managing it. It all comes down to some really smart ecological design. For light, you're just being a good matchmaker, pairing tall trees with crops like coffee that actually love the shade. For nutrients, it's all about what's happening underground. The deep tree roots act like these natural elevators, pulling up minerals from way down below and dropping them on the surface as leaves fall. It's free fertilizer. And then there's water. The whole system, the trees, the roots, the rich soil, acts like a giant sponge, soaking up every drop of rain instead of letting it wash away. This makes the entire farm way more resilient to drought. So when you start designing a farm to act like a real ecosystem, you start to see all these incredible benefits just stack up. It's pretty amazing.
I mean, the results are fantastic. First off, your soil gets way healthier and you stop losing it to erosion. Then, biodiversity just goes through the roof, creating homes for birds, pollinators, all kinds of wildlife. Plus,
These farms become these amazing carbon sponges, pulling CO2 out of the air. And, maybe most importantly for the person running the farm, you get more income security because you're not relying on just one single crop.
And because the whole system is just healthier, farmers don't need to dump a bunch of chemical inputs on it. It also makes them way more resilient to the shocks of a changing climate. It's a classic case of the whole being so much greater than the sum of its parts.
So, where does this leave us?
What does all this really mean for the future of how we grow our food?
When you get right down to it, agroforestry represents a huge shift in how we think. It's about moving away from this idea of a farm as a factory, with simple inputs and outputs, and embracing the idea of a farm as a living, breathing ecosystem, one that thrives on the same kind of complexity and collaboration you'd find in a wild forest.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating question to chew on. We started with this idea that you had to choose, farms or forests. But it turns out that was a false choice all along. By bringing them together, we can create something that's more productive and more resilient than either one on its own. And it just makes you wonder, what other big either-or problems are out there just waiting for us to look at them differently? If a farm can be a forest, what else can we reimagine?